As we've discussed in previous videos, and as a consequence of Donald Trump and Elon Musk's wildly unpopular agenda, elected Republicans across the country have faced increasingly intense backlash from their own voters face to face in town hall events, which have gone viral. But rather than modify the agenda and respond to the wishes of the voters, cowardly Republican leaders are now urging their fellow elected Republicans to simply stop having town hall events altogether, to avoid their voters and their constituents. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. Folks, the cowardice of the Republican Party under Donald Trump could not be more apparent. But before I get to the recent reports about the directives that Republican leadership are giving their fellow politicians, I want you to see this exchange between the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, the most powerful Republican lawmaker in the legislative branch. I want you to see his exchange with CNN's Caitlin Collins, because it helps set the mindset for all of these, how Republicans, I guess, are reacting to these viral moments.
Just asking because, as you know, your home state of Louisiana, about 80% of the Medicaid spending there is covered by the federal government. We've seen it in a lot of red states, of course, across the United States. It's not just a blue state issue. As you have seen through this, and we've seen the blowback that some Republicans in your caucus that are getting when they go back home to their districts, worried about these cuts or worried about what DOJ is doing. Do you have concerns that that's anything that Democrats will be able to use to run against those Republicans?
No, because no, I don't. Because the videos you saw of the town halls were for paid protesters in many of those places. These are Democrats who went to the events early and filled up the seats. If the videos had panned outside the building, you can't argue
they were all paid protesters, though, Mr. Speaker.
Many of them were.
A Republican acknowledged they were his constituents.
One Republican acknowledged they were his constituents. That's fantastic. Okay, but they had Democrats come and fill the seats early, all right? This is an old playbook that they pulled out and ran, and it made it look like that what is happening in Washington is unpopular. But I'm going to tell you, Caitlin, the American people are behind what's happening. The DOJ efforts is polling over 80% right now. They want us to find efficiencies in the federal government. They want the government to be smaller and leaner and more accountable to the taxpayers. And that's what these efforts are all about. That's what the Republican Party is about. That's what our commitment is to do, to make government work better for the people. This is a restoration of common sense above everything else. And I think the American people are going to remain in favor of what's happening here.
Okay, those lawmakers do also represent Democrats. That doesn't mean they were paid to show up if they're upset about this, but just asking.
So again, you see the cope from Mike Johnson. Oh, all the criticism we're getting, that's from like paid actors and like paid Democrats. Like, we're perfect and everybody loves what we're doing. And the only way people could like disagree is like, if they're like paid. So this is really stupid and really dishonest from Mike Johnson. Couple of things. He's deliberately conflating two separate notions. One is the notion of cutting legitimate waste, fraud, and abuse, which is universally popular, even among liberals, progressives, and Democrats. It's just simply that we very often disagree about what constitutes waste, fraud, and abuse. But the other thing is actually DOJ in practice, DOJ in reality. And the polling for DOJ in reality, DOJ, what it has actually done, and Elon Musk in particular, is disastrous. So Mike Johnson just lied to your face right there, okay? Now, let's get into the breaking news. So it actually began with the New York Times, but I'm going to go, or not the New York Times, I'm sorry, NBC, who broke the story. But I like Rolling Stone's writing more. They're covering this. They're sassier, and I love it. GOP leaders advise lawmakers to simply stop hosting town halls, according to report. Republicans have been bombarded by backlash. The party solution is to turn and run. Republicans returned to their districts last week only to be met with legions of angry constituents demanding answers over their acquiescence to drastic cuts orchestrated by Elon Musk and the Trump administration. Instead of actually listening to the voters who put them in office, GOP leaders are reportedly advising lawmakers to simply stop meeting with them in person. According to a Tuesday report from NBC News, House Republican leadership has advised members of the caucus to avoid in-person town halls for fear that voter backlash may become viral if circulated online. Quote, I don't know that a specific edict is going to come down on high that they need to stop or anything, but a message I believe has been clearly sent that this narrative should end very soon, one Republican National Committee official told NBC News. Over the course of the last week, multiple Republican House members saw their names make headlines after tense confrontations with constituents in their home districts went viral on social media. Many of the complaints centered around Musk and his so-called Department of Government Efficiency, which has been conducting mass firings of federal workers while gutting or effectively eliminating congressionally authorized programs. Representative Rich McCormick of Georgia was recently mercilessly heckled during a town hall, which we discussed, in Georgia's 7th congressional district. He was booed by constituents, several of whom questioned the authority granted to Musk, the seemingly arbitrary nature of the cuts, and Trump's statements comparing himself to a king. Quote, "Why is a supposedly conservative party taking such a radical and extremist and sloppy approach to this?" one constituent asked. In Texas, Representative Pete Sessions recently sparred with furious voters who accused him of ceding his authority as a member of Congress to the executive. Quote, "The executive can only enforce laws passed by Congress. They cannot make laws," one attendee said. "When are you going to wrest control back from the executive and stop hurting your constituents?" Early polling shows that a growing majority of Americans is concerned about the unchecked concentration of power between Musk and Trump. Last week, a Washington Ipsos poll found that 57% of Americans think Trump is overstepping his authority, and that, quote, "Americans disapprove by a 2-to-1 margin of Musk shutting down federal agencies that he decides are unnecessary, and most, 63%, are concerned that his team is gaining access to sensitive personal data of individuals." Voters may be mad, but the Republican Party remains broadly supportive of Musk and Trump's antics, even if they steamroll over lawmakers' constitutional powers. Chief among constituents' concerns are signs that Musk and congressional Republicans are looking to take a hacksaw to prominent social safety net programs, including Medicaid and Social Security. On Tuesday, the House passed a proposed budget that included $4.5 trillion in tax cuts, mostly for the nation's wealthiest Americans, and over $2 billion in unspecified spending cuts. The budget instructs the House and Energy Commerce Committee to find $880 billion in spending cuts through 2034. If history is anything to go by, those proposed cuts will likely come from Medicaid. Quote, "You're talking about $880 billion worth of cuts in Medicaid," Senator Chris Murphy said in a press conference on Thursday. "That's a huge number nobody understands. Let me tell you what that means. That means sick kids die in this country. That means that hospitals in depressed communities, in rural communities, close their doors, right? That means that drug and addiction treatment centers disappear all across this country. That means that millions of working families who have health insurance today, because, by the way, 24% of Americans get their health care from Medicaid, they all of a sudden don't have their health care tomorrow. And for what? Because Elon Musk needs another $1 billion? Pretty compelling argument. Very bad stuff from this Republican Party. Very bad stuff. Again, NBC was the one who broke the story. House Republicans hit the brakes on town halls after blowback over Trump's cuts. Party leaders suggest that if lawmakers feel the need to hold such events, they do teletown halls or at least vet attendees to avoid scenes that become viral clips, according to GOP sources. A GOP aide said that House Republican leaders are urging lawmakers to stop engaging in them altogether. The town halls and the rash of negative headlines have been the first bit of public blowback from members who face voters next year. And the new reluctance to hold them indicates that there are bubbling concerns about the impact the cuts could have on the GOP's chances of holding its thin majority in the House next year. So, folks, again, objectively speaking, full-on cowardice from these elected Republicans. They've already displayed it with respect to Trump and Musk, an unelected MAGA billionaire, a.k.a. shadow president, but they're also terrified of you. They're terrified of you, their voters, their constituents, including the conservative ones. They don't want to hear your criticisms in good faith or otherwise, and they don't give a damn that you voted for them before. They don't want to hear it. They're afraid. The lack of accountability for this whole thing is spreading not just from Trump and Musk, which is bad enough, but also it's trickling down to the other constituent lawmakers in the Republican Party. And it's really gross, and it should be called out. And it shows that they know deep down, despite the cope to the contrary, despite the bullshit from Mike Johnson in the face of CNN host Caitlin Collins, they know that what they are doing in practice is objectively unpopular, and they are terrified of suffering political consequences in the next election. And you should make them even more scared by making it clear that they will face political consequences in the next election if they don't stop. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.